We may brave human laws, but we cannot resist natural ones. Though sleep is called our best friend, it is a friend who often keeps us waiting. Science, my lad, is made up of mistakes, but they are mistakes which it is useful to make, because they lead little by little to the truth. Well, my friend, this earth will one day be that cold corpse. It will become uninhabitable and uninhabited like the moon, which has long since lost all its vital heat. The sea is only the embodiment of a supernatural and wonderful existence. With happiness as with health, to enjoy it, one should be deprived of it occasionally. Nothing is more dreadful than private duels in America. The two adversaries attack each other like wild beasts. Then it is that they might well covet those wonderful properties of the Indians of the prairies, their quick intelligence, their ingenious cunning, their scent of the enemy. The Yankees, the first mechanicians in the world, are engineers, just as the Italians are musicians and the Germans metaphysicians, by right of birth. Nothing is more natural, therefore, than to perceive them applying their audacious ingenuity to the science of gunnery. However strong, however imposing a ship may appear, it is not disgraced because it flies before the tempest. A commander ought always to remember that a man's life is worth more than the mere satisfaction of his own pride. In any case, to be obstinate is blamable, and to be willful is dangerous. It may be taken for granted that, rash as Americans usually are, when they are prudent, there is good reason for it. I believe cats to be spirits come to earth. A cat, I am sure, could walk on a cloud without coming through. The sea is everything. It covers 7/10 of the terrestrial globe. Its breath is pure and healthy. It is an immense desert, where man is never lonely, for he feels life stirring on all sides. In spite of the opinions of certain narrow-minded people, who would shut up the human race upon this globe, as within some magic circle it must never outstep, we shall one day travel to the moon, the planets, and the stars, with the same facility, rapidity, and certainty as we now make the voyage from Liverpool to New York. Imagine a society in which there were neither rich nor poor. What evils, afflictions, sorrows, disorders, catastrophes, disasters, tribulations, misfortunes, agonies, calamities, despair, desolation and ruin would be unknown to man. Dost thou know what life is, my child? Hast thou comprehended the action of those springs which produce existence? Hast thou examined thyself? Put two ships in the open sea, without wind or tide, and, at last, they will come together. Throw two planets into space, and they will fall one on the other. Place two enemies in the midst of a crowd, and they will inevitably meet. It is a fatality, a question of time, that is all. Trains, like time and tide, stop for no one. The sea is the vast reservoir of nature. The globe began with sea, so to speak, and who knows if it will not end with it. When one has taken root, one puts out branches. A man of merit owes himself to the homage of the rest of mankind who recognize his worth. The possession of wealth leads almost inevitably to its abuse. It is the chief, if not the only, cause of evils which desolate this world below. The thirst for gold is responsible for the most regrettable lapses into sin. Everything is possible for an eccentric, especially when he is English. If Providence has created the stars and the planets, man has called the cannonball into existence. On the morrow the horizon was covered with clouds, a thick and impenetrable curtain between earth and sky, which unhappily extended as far as the Rocky Mountains. It was a fatality. Solitude, isolation, are painful things, and beyond human endurance. I have noticed that many who do not believe in God believe in everything else, even in the evil eye. Man, a mere inhabitant of the earth, cannot overstep its boundaries. But though he is confined to its crust, he may penetrate into all its secrets. It is certain that the inanimate objects by which you are surrounded have a direct action on the brain. You're never rich enough if you can be richer. Far better to be the simplest pedestrian, with knapsack on back, stick in hand, and gun on shoulder, than an Indian prince traveling with all the ceremonial which his rank requires. Everything great in science and art is simple. What can be less complicated than the greatest discoveries of humanity, gravitation, the compass, the printing press, the steam engine, the electric telegraph? He who is mistaken in an action which he sincerely believes to be right may be an enemy, but retains our esteem. In presence of nature's grand convulsions man is powerless. Ah! Young people, travel if you can, and if you cannot, travel all the same. The industrial stomach cannot live without coal. Industry is a carbonivorous animal and must have its proper food. An energetic man will succeed where an indolent one would vegetate and inevitably perish. When the mind once allows a doubt to gain entrance, the value of deeds performed grow less, their character changes, we forget the past and dread the future. Be it understood you are never rich when you get no advantage from it. Dost thou not understand that there are two distinct forces in us, that of the soul and that of the body, that is, a movement and a regulator? Everybody knows that England is the world of betting men, who are of a higher class than mere gamblers. To bet is in the English temperament. We were alone. Where, I could not say, hardly imagine. All was black, and such a dense black that, after some minutes, my eyes had not been able to discern even the faintest glimmer. It is said that the night brings counsel, but it is not said that the counsel is necessarily good. You cannot oppose reasoning to pride, the principal of all the vices, since, by its very nature, the proud man refuses to listen to it. The Nautilus was piercing the water with its sharp spur, after having accomplished nearly 10,000 leagues in 3 months and a half, a distance greater than the great circle of the earth. Where were we going now, and what was reserved for the future? Everybody knows that the great reverse triangle of land, with its base in the north and its apex in the south, which is called India, embraces 1,400,000 square miles, upon which is spread unequally a population of 180 millions of souls. I seriously believed that my last hour was approaching, and yet, so strange is imagination, all I thought of was some childish hypothesis or other. In such circumstances, you do not choose your own thoughts. They overcome you. Man's constitution is so peculiar that his health is purely a negative matter. No sooner is the rage of hunger appeased than it becomes difficult to comprehend the meaning of starvation. It is only when you suffer that you really understand. Before all masters, necessity is the one most listened to, and who teaches the best. The body regulates the soul, and, like the balance wheel, it is submitted to regular oscillations. Put 2 Yankees in a room together, and in an hour they will each have gained $10 from the other. A true Englishman doesn't joke when he is talking about so serious a thing as a wager. Fellows who have rascally faces have only one course to take, and that is to remain honest, otherwise, they would be arrested offhand. You see sentiment better when you get clear of nature. You breathe it in every sense. Movement is life, and it is well to be able to forget the past, and kill the present by continual change. Civilization never recedes, the law of necessity ever forces it onwards. One's native land. There should one live. There die. When science has sent forth her fiat, it is only to hear and obey. When you bring a man 2 millions of money, you need have but little fear that you will not be well received. The sea does not belong to despots. Upon its surface men can still exercise unjust laws, fight, tear one another to pieces, and be carried away with terrestrial horrors. But at 30 feet below its level, their reign ceases, their influence is quenched, and their power disappears. Nothing can astound an American. It has often been asserted that the word impossible is not a French one. People have evidently been deceived by the dictionary. In America, all is easy, all is simple, and as for mechanical difficulties, they are overcome before they arise. I repeat that the distance between the Earth and her satellite is a mere trifle, and undeserving of serious consideration. I am convinced that before 20 years are over, 1/2 of our Earth will have paid a visit to the Moon. Now, when an American has an idea, he directly seeks a second American to share it. If there be 3, they elect a president and 2 secretaries. Given 4, they name a keeper of records, and the office is ready for work. 5, they convene a general meeting, and the club is fully constituted. As long as a man's heart beats, as long as a man's flesh quivers, I do not allow that a being gifted with thought and will can allow himself to despair. It is always a vulgar and often an unhealthy pastime, and it is a vice which does not go alone. The man who gambles will find himself capable of any evil. Numerous observations made upon fevers, somnambulisms, and other human maladies, seem to prove that the moon does exercise some mysterious influence upon man. So is man's heart. The desire to perform a work which will endure, which will survive him, is the origin of his superiority over all other living creatures here below. It is this which has established his dominion, and this it is which justifies it, over all the world. The moon, by her comparative proximity, and the constantly varying appearances produced by her several phases, has always occupied a considerable share of the attention of the inhabitants of the earth. One has only to follow events, and you will be all right. The surest way is to take whatever comes as it comes. The wisest man may be a blind father. It must be that a man who shuts himself up between 4 walls must lose the faculty of associating ideas and words. In consequence of inventing machines, men will be devoured by them. In the United States, there is no project so audacious for which people cannot be found to guarantee the cost and find the working expenses. It is for others one must learn to do everything, for there lies the secret of happiness. What is there unreasonable in admitting the intervention of a supernatural power in the most ordinary circumstances of life? The Chinaman has only a passive courage, but this courage he possesses in the highest degree. His indifference to death is truly extraordinary. When he is ill, he sees it approach, and does not falter. When condemned, and already in the hands of an officer, he manifests no fear. The regions of the North Pole situated within the 84th degree of north latitude have not yet been utilized, for the very good reason that they have not yet been discovered. To modify the conditions of the Earth's movement is beyond the powers of man. It is not given to mankind to change the order established by the Creator in the system of the universe. To put up with what you cannot avoid is a philosophical principle that may not perhaps lead you to the accomplishment of great deeds, but is assuredly eminently practical. On the 31st of October, at 10 o'clock in the morning, the troop disembarked on the quays of Tampa town, and one may imagine the activity which pervaded that little town, whose population was thus doubled in a single day. Whatever one man is capable of conceiving, other men will be able to achieve. He rose at 13 minutes to 1, and directed his steps towards the large hall, a sumptuous apartment adorned with lavishly framed paintings. A flunky handed him an uncut Times, which he proceeded to cut with a skill which betrayed familiarity with this delicate operation. Was I to believe him in earnest in his intention to penetrate to the center of this massive globe? Had I been listening to the mad speculations of a lunatic, or to the scientific conclusions of a lofty genius? Where did truth stop? Where did error begin? To those who were not familiar with the motions of the moon, they demonstrated that she possesses two distinct motions, the first being that of rotation upon her axis, the second being that of revolution round the earth, accomplishing both together in an equal period of time, that is to say, in 27 1/3 days. The resolutions passed at the last meeting produced a great effect out of doors. Timid people took fright at the idea of a shot weighing 20,000 pounds being launched into space. They asked what cannon could ever transmit a sufficient velocity to such a mighty mass. The way of describing this unlooked-for scene, the history of the Patriot ship, told at first so coldly, and the emotion with which this strange man pronounced the last words, the name of the Avenger, the significance of which could not escape me, all impressed itself deeply on my mind. My eyes did not leave the captain, who, with his hand stretched out to sea, was watching with a glowing eye the glorious wreck. This forcible abduction, so roughly carried out, was accomplished with the rapidity of lightning. I shivered all over. Whom had we to deal with? No doubt some new sort of pirates, who explored the sea in their own way. Hardly had the narrow panel closed upon me, when I was enveloped in darkness. How many persons condemned to the horrors of solitary confinement have gone mad, simply because the thinking faculties have lain dormant? How much further can we go? What are the final frontiers in this quest for travel? Will humankind only be satisfied when journeys into space become readily available and affordable? He believed in it, as certain good women believe in the Leviathan by faith, not by reason. What use are the best of arguments when they can be destroyed by force? A cow peacefully grazing 50 yards away received one of the bullets in her back. She had nothing to do with the quarrel all the same. During the War of the Rebellion, a new and influential club was established in the city of Baltimore in the state of Maryland. An Englishman does not joke about such an important matter as a bet. I would have bartered a diamond mine for a glass of pure spring water. A scholar has to know a little of everything. Anything a man can imagine, another can create. What a big book, Captain, might be made with all that is known. And what a much bigger book still with all that is not known. All great actions return to God, from whom they are derived. As for Phileas Fogg, it seemed just as if the typhoon were a part of his program. You are going to visit the land of marvels. There where fortune clears away, thither our ready footsteps stray. I can undertake and persevere even without hope of success. With its untold depths, couldn't the sea keep alive such huge specimens of life from another age? This sea that never changes while the land masses undergo almost continuous alteration. Couldn't the heart of the ocean hide the last remaining varieties of these titanic species, for whom years are centuries and centuries millennia? Captain Nemo pointed to this prodigious heap of shellfish, and I saw that these mines were genuinely inexhaustible, since nature's creative powers are greater than man's destructive instincts. Nature's creative power is far beyond man's instinct of destruction. At Kiel, as elsewhere, a day goes by somehow or other. Man is never perfect nor contented. However, everything has an end, everything passes away, even the hunger of people who have not eaten. But to find, all at once, right before your eyes, that the impossible had been mysteriously achieved by man himself, this staggers the mind. My house is small, but may heaven grant that it is never full of friends. And whichsoever way thou goest, may fortune follow. What one man can think, another man can do. Ores habent iti non audient, they have ears but hear not. If there were no thunder, men would have little fear of lightning. Great robbers always resemble honest folk. Fellows who have rascally faces have only one course to take, and that is to remain honest, otherwise, they would be arrested offhand. In light-hearted countries, people joked about this phenomenon, but such serious, practical countries as England, America, and Germany were deeply concerned. Savages, he echoed, ironically. You set foot on one of the shores of this globe, Professor, and you're surprised to find savages. Where aren't there savages? Besides, are they any worse than others, these whom you call savages? I have been, am, in his service. I have seen his generosity and goodness, and I will never betray him, not for all the gold in the world. I have come from a village where they don't eat that kind of bread. I say, you do have a heart. Sometimes, he replied, when I have the time. On the earth, even in the darkest night, the light never wholly abandons his rule. It is diffused and subtle, but little as may remain, the retina of the eye is sensible of it. We see that science is eminently perfectible, and that each theory has constantly to give way to a fresh one. But Phileas Fogg, who was not traveling, but only describing a circumference. On the surface of the ocean, men wage war and destroy each other, but down here, just a few feet beneath the surface, there is a calm and peace unmolested by man. When I returned to partial life, my face was wet with tears. How long that state of insensibility had lasted I cannot say. I had no means now of taking account of time. Never was solitude equal to this, never had any living being been so utterly forsaken. Ah! I cried, springing up. But no! No! My uncle shall never know it. He would insist upon doing it too. He would want to know all about it. Ropes could not hold him, such a determined geologist as he is. He would start, he would, in spite of everything and everybody, and he would take me with him, and we should never get back. No, never. Never. My overexcitement was beyond all description. It is certain, exclaimed my uncle in a tone of triumph. But silence, do you hear me? Silence upon the whole subject, and let no one get before us in this design of discovering the center of the earth. What pen can describe this scene of marvelous horror? What pencil can portray it? I looked on, I thought, I reflected, I admired, in a state of stupefaction not altogether unmingled with fear. It may be taken for granted that, rash as the Americans are, when they are prudent there is good reason for it. It was obvious that the matter had to be settled, and evasions were distasteful to me. Dinner was ready. Professor Lidenbrock did full justice to it, for his compulsory fast on board had turned his stomach into an unfathomable gulf. Liberty is worth paying for. Is the master out of his mind? She asked me. I nodded. And he's taking you with him? I nodded again. Where? She asked. I pointed towards the center of the earth. Into the cellar, exclaimed the old servant. No, I said, farther down than that. Whatever one man is capable of imagining, other men will prove themselves capable of realizing. Science, my boy, is composed of errors, but errors that it is right to make, for they lead step by step to the truth. I believe cats to be spirits come to earth. No sooner is the rage of hunger appeased than it becomes difficult to comprehend the meaning of starvation. It is only when you suffer that you really understand. It swam crossways in the direction of the Nautilus with great speed, watching us with its enormous staring green eyes. Its 8 arms, or rather feet, fixed to its head, that have given the name of cephalopod to these animals, were twice as long as its body, and were twisted like the Fury's hair. I have always fancied that the end of the world will be when some enormous boiler, heated to 3,000 millions of atmospheric pressure, shall explode and blow up the globe. They, the Americans, are great boilermakers. Wherever he saw a hole he always wanted to know the depth of it. To him this was important. How tranquil is a coral tomb, and may the heavens grant that my companions and I be buried in no other. The sole preoccupation of this learned society was the destruction of humanity for philanthropic reasons and the perfection of weapons as instruments of civilization. I am nothing to you but Captain Nemo, and you and your companions are nothing to me but the passengers of the Nautilus. Scent is the soul of flowers, and sea flowers, as splendid as they may be, have no soul. Science, my lad, has been built upon many errors, but they are errors which it was good to fall into, for they led to the truth. Until I discover the meaning of this sentence, I will neither eat nor sleep. My dear uncle, I began. Nor you either, he added. I see that it is by no means useless to travel, if a man wants to see something new. The human mind delights in grand conceptions of supernatural beings. With time and thought, one can do a good job. Steam seems to have killed all gratitude in the hearts of sailors. Well, I feel that we should always put a little art into what we do. It's better that way. Your dead sleep quietly, at least, Captain, out of reach of sharks, yes, sir, of sharks and men. But what then? What had he really gained by all this trouble? What had he brought back from this long and weary journey? Nothing, you say. Perhaps so, nothing but a charming woman, strange as it may appear, made him the happiest of men. Truly, would you not for less than that make the tour around the world? I saw the world. I learnt of new cultures. I flew across an ocean. I wore women's clothing, made a friend, fell in love. Who cares if I lost a wager? Queen Victoria, I do. I've got 20 quid riding on you. There is no more sagacious animal than the Icelandic horse. He is stopped by neither snow, nor storm, nor impassable roads, nor rocks, glaciers, or anything. He is courageous, sober, and sure-footed. He never makes a false step, never shies. If there is a river or fjord to cross, and we shall meet with many, You will see him plunge in at once, just as if he were amphibious, and gain the opposite bank. I had no need of sails to drive me, nor oars nor wheels to push me, nor rails to give me a faster road. Air is what I wanted, that was all. Air surrounds me as water surrounds the submarine boat, and in it my propellers act like the screws of a steamer. That is how I solved the problem of aviation. That is what a balloon will never do, nor will any machine that is lighter than air. The human mind delights in grand conceptions of supernatural beings. And the sea is precisely their best vehicle, the only medium through which these giants, against which terrestrial animals, such as elephants or rhinoceroses, are as nothing, can be produced or developed. Poets are like proverbs, you can always find one to contradict another. In the memory of the dead all chronological differences are effaced. Hunger, prolonged, is temporary madness. The brain is at work without its required food, and the most fantastic notions fill the mind. Hitherto I had never known what hunger really meant. I was likely to understand it now. The colonists had no library at their disposal, but the engineer was a book which was always at hand, always open at the page which one wanted, a book which answered all their questions, and which they often consulted. There is hope for the future, and when the world is ready for a new and better life, all these things will someday come to pass, in God's good time. Well, gentlemen, do you believe in the possibility of aerial locomotion by machines heavier than air? You ask yourselves doubtless if this apparatus, so marvelously adapted for aerial locomotion, is susceptible of receiving greater speed. It is not worthwhile to conquer space if we cannot devour it. I wanted the air to be a solid support to me, and it is. I saw that to struggle against the wind I must be stronger than the wind, and I am. It's really useful to travel, if you want to see new things. I believe that water will one day be employed as fuel, that hydrogen and oxygen which constitute it, used singly or together, will furnish an inexhaustible source of heat and light, of an intensity of which coal is not capable. One's native land. There should one live. There die. The cold, increased by the tremendous speed, deprived them of the power of speech. Oysters are the only food that never causes indigestion. Indeed, a man would have to eat 16 dozen of these acephalous mollusks in order to gain the 315 grams of nitrogen he requires daily. Powder is but a thing of yesterday, and war is as old as the human race unhappily. Well, I thought I was so tranquil. I need to give up that illusion. There is decidedly no rest to be had in this world. An English criminal, you know, is always better concealed in London than anywhere else. Better to put things at the worst at first and reserve the best for a surprise. External objects produce decided effects upon the brain. A man shut up between four walls soon loses the power to associate words and ideas together. How many prisoners in solitary confinement become idiots, if not mad, for want of exercise for the thinking faculty? I have always made a point in my romances of basing my so-called inventions upon a groundwork of actual fact, and of using in their construction methods and materials which are not entirely without the pale of contemporary engineering skill and knowledge. All that is impossible remains to be accomplished. What you do for money you do badly. You will travel in a land of marvels. I am very bad at expressing tender sentiments. The very word love frightens me. Anything capable of being imagined will one day be made reality. He must have traveled everywhere, at least in the spirit. Anything you can imagine you can make real. The distance between the Earth and her satellite is a mere trifle, and undeserving of serious consideration. I am convinced that before 20 years are over, one half of our Earth will have paid a visit to the Moon. From the moment they had left the Earth, their own weight, and that of the projectile and the objects therein contained, had been undergoing a progressive diminution. Of course, it is quite clear that this decrease could not be indicated by an ordinary scales, as the weight to balance the object would have lost precisely as much as the object itself. But a spring balance, for instance, in which the tension of the coil is independent of attraction, would have readily given the exact equivalent of the loss. Yes, I could see these enormous elephants, whose trunks were tearing down large boughs, and working in and out the trees like a legion of serpents. I could hear the sounds of the mighty tusks uprooting huge trees. What I'd like to be above all is a writer. Man is so constituted that health is a purely negative state. Hunger once satisfied, it is difficult for a man to imagine the horrors of starvation. They cannot be understood without being felt. It must be, for there is a logic to everything on this earth and nothing is done without a reason, that God sometimes lets scientists discover. However, the balloon, lightened of heavy articles, such as ammunition, arms, and provisions, had risen into the higher layers of the atmosphere, to a height of 4,500 feet. The voyagers, after having discovered that the sea extended beneath them, and thinking the dangers above less dreadful than those below, did not hesitate to throw overboard even their most useful articles, while they endeavor to lose no more of that fluid, the life of their enterprise, which sustained them above the abyss. Now when an American has an idea, he directly seeks a second American to share it. If there be 3, they elect a president and 2 secretaries. Given 4, they name a keeper of records, and the office is ready for work. 5, they convene a general meeting, and the club is fully constituted. It was all very well for an Englishman like Mr. Fogg to make the tour of the world with a carpet-bag. A lady could not be expected to travel comfortably under such conditions. What darkness to you is light to me. It is not new continents the earth needs, but new men. I wanted to see what no one had yet observed, even if I had to pay for this curiosity with my life. He believed in it, as certain good women believe in the Leviathan by faith, not by reason. He was the most deliberate person in the world, yet always reached his destination at the exact moment. As for Phileas Fogg, it seemed just as if the typhoon were a part of his program. Around the world in 80 days. We now know most things that can be measured in this world, except the bounds of human ambition. The sea is only the embodiment of a supernatural and wonderful existence. It is nothing but love and emotion, it is the living infinite. The earth does not need new continents, but new men. Oh, figures, answered Ned. You can make figures do whatever you want. It is a great misfortune to be alone, my friends, and it must be believed that solitude can quickly destroy reason. As for difficulties, replied Fergusson, in a serious tone, they were made to be overcome. Ah, monsieur, to live in the bosom of the sea. Only there can independence be found. There I recognize no master. There I am free. It seems wisest to assume the worst from the beginning, and let anything better come as a surprise. In spite of the opinions of certain narrow-minded people who would shut up the human race upon this globe, we shall one day travel to the moon, the planets, and the stars with the same facility, rapidity, and certainty as we now make the ocean voyage from Liverpool to New York. Travel enables us to enrich our lives with new experiences, to enjoy and to be educated, to learn respect for foreign cultures, to establish friendships, and above all to contribute to international cooperation and peace throughout the world. Look with all your eyes, look. As long as the heart beats, as long as body and soul keep together, I cannot admit that any creature endowed with a will has need to despair of life. The great architect of the universe built it of good firm stuff. We are of opinion that instead of letting books grow moldy behind an iron grating, far from the vulgar gaze, it is better to let them wear out by being read. While there is life there is hope. I beg to assert, that as long as a man's heart beats, as long as a man's flesh quivers, I do not allow that a being gifted with thought and will can allow himself to despair. Why lower oneself to taking pride from being American or British, when you can boast of being man? There are no impossible obstacles, there are just stronger and weaker wills, that's all. The chance which now seems lost may present itself at the last moment. Reality provides us with facts so romantic that imagination itself could add nothing to them. Anything one man can imagine, other men can make real. How many things have been denied one day, only to become realities the next? Ah, pierce me 100 times with your needles fine and I will thank you 100 times, Saint Morphine, you who Aesculapius has made a god.